fishing, it's in my soul.
Welcome to the Salt Strong Podcast, disrupting fishing entertainment as you know it. Prepare to laugh. Prepare to get to know fishing legends in a whole new and unfiltered way. And on occasion, you might even learn a thing or two about fishing. Here's your host, Joe Simons. Like diamonds.
Hello, Salt Strong Nation. Joe Simons, like diamonds. We are back. This is going to be a fun one if you love catching speckled trout or the spotted sea trout or specks, wherever you happen to be from. You are going to love this one. Got my boy Captain Matt Chipperfield. So kind of the backstory here. It's funny how this is all tying together. So we've had Chris Bush from the Speckled Truth on the show. Definitely one of our most downloaded episodes, talking all about big old gator trout. And this guy, Chris, is probably documented, and especially when you combine he and his dad, they probably have more knowledge and have documented more intel on going out there and consistently catching big trout all year long, from Texas kind of that, I don't know, North Carolina, Virginia range. And he had mentioned Capt and Matt, because I was like, well, who else is, doing a good job of reporting these trophy citation trout in Florida? And he mentioned Captain Matt Chipperfield. And I've been following Matt on Instagram, and dude's constantly posting big pics. And then I had Captain Tyler on recently, and I was talking with Matt offline, and he mentioned he went to Eckerd College. I was like, well, hey, do you know Tyler by chance? And he's like, yeah, we were roommates. And the whole thing tied together. So if you missed someone with Tyler, he talked about catching a grouper, like a nice gag grouper, a keeper gag grouper, I believe, from the third floor balcony and reeling it up. And his roommates were sitting in the second floor watching it go up. And it happens to be that Captain Matt was one of them. So Matt, welcome to the show, brother.
Thanks for having me, bud. Yeah, I was a first-hand witness to Tyler's third-story window grouper.
That is a trip, man. All right, so you're now over. I know you guys were in St. Pete when you met, and I know Tyler had a big role in kind of helping you get going with your guide business, and
absolutely,
talking offline kind of put you on the spot, it sounds like. And now you're over in that St. Augustine, Jacksonville area. Is that right?
Yes, sir. I'm actually I'm in Jacksonville, but I'm right on the border of Jacksonville, Ponte Vedra, which is just a short jog from St. Augustine. I spend most of my time fishing in St. Augustine, an area in between called Guana, and then up in the northern end of Jacksonville towards Mayport and North Jacks.
Cool. So I got to ask right off the bat, what's your biggest trout? What's the trophy so far?
My biggest trout is actually a really great story. It's 32 inches long. I didn't have a scale on at the time. Probably around usually when they're about 30 to 33, they're in that 10-pound range. She wasn't overly fat, real proportional, big head, big tail, nice gut, but nothing too fat. I caught her towards the early summer, so it was out of the spawn. But yeah, I was in a kayak tournament we used to have up here in Jacks called the Jacksonville Greater Kayak Tournament. I believe it's the Jacks Classic. And it was, at the time, the largest kayak fishing tournament in the world. Over 300 some anglers. Wow. All the Hobie guys and native guys, all the local pros from Louisiana up to North Carolina. A lot of guys would come down for it. And it was my first time competing on a paddleboard there, and ended up catching a 32-inch trout with a 34-inch red and an 18-inch flounder to round out the tournament win. But yeah, I caught the 32 in a tournament, and I still haven't been able to beat her yet. I've caught a 30 on fly. That was a good moment. I've had a 31. Had a couple clients catch 31s. Another couple that have caught some 30s, a lot with the 27 to 29 inch range. Most of these fish are probably in the 8 to barely 10-pound range. I haven't caught too many 10-pound fish. That's kind of a holy grail mark with both trout and bass. But yeah, a lot of 27 to 32s. The biggest fish I know that's come out of my area that I fish a lot is that I can verify that was on a board was 33 and a half inches. Again, I'm not too sure on the weight, but 33 and a half inches was caught by a friend of mine named Daniel Holmes, who was on the kayak at the time. But yeah, there's been some pretty good fish. I'm sure there's a not world record, but probably Florida state record swimming somewhere around the area that I'm in. And hopefully one day I'll get to see one.
Thanks. And so I got to ask, what did you catch it on? Your personal best?
Mine was caught on a pop and cork rig with a soft plastic beneath it. I was fishing probably around, it was probably 10 o'clock in the morning at this point. I'd already caught the 34-inch redfish, and I paddled out into an area of the lagoon that I fished that I had caught some good trout at the week before scouting for the tournament, and made a couple casts. Was talking to a friend of mine, actually at the time, who knew me through the fishing forum I was on, and was asking if I'd caught a 30-incher yet. And I told him, no, I've been, caught handfuls of 27s and 29s, just haven't broke that mark yet. And, no lie, 10 minutes later, popping the cork goes down and yank on it. And there's a 32-inch trout on the end of it. And I looked over at him word for word. He's like, I think I'm a member of the 30-inch club, man. I think I did it. Like, you got to be kidding me. And he paddled over and he witnessed it. And he actually took a really clutch photo of me holding the 32 and paddled back about 6 miles the opposite direction and fished on the riverside and got the trout or the flounder to round up and slam. So yeah, that was fun. But yeah, soft plastic paddle tail and little cork, dirty water, a little bit windy. So
the old paddle tail, I love it, man.
Yeah, it works.
So you won the tournament. That's a way to put your name on the map.
Tournament, yeah. It was the first tournament I'd ever competed in for fishing, paddle tournament. And, it was cool. I won a kayak and ended up actually selling the kayak to pay for the trolling motor for my flats boat that I captain off of now.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, it was a cool tournament and a lot of anglers. And fortunately they don't run it anymore. After about, I think 10 to 13 years it was around, they shut it down. But, that was a 32. I still haven't beat her yet.
Man, that's, for all of us over here on the other coast, we don't really have 32s, so that's pretty stinking awesome. So what do you consider a gator? Is it 27 and above for you guys?
It goes off of, I would say, two factors: length or weight, either or. In the spawning period in the spring, or going into the winter, when the water's around 70 something degrees, they're feeding well and they get really fat, you might catch a fish that's only 23 to 24 inches long. But she could be almost 5 or 6 pounds, maybe even 7 pounds, depending on how fat she is. If she's got egg sacs that are, rode out and been eating mullet, she might have a football in her gut. I've caught some fish that are in the 24 to 25 inch range that are as heavy as a 26 or 27 inch fish, depending on what stage they're at. But I start thinking about gators being around 25 inches if they have a good gut on them. 24 is, in the area that I fish in, is a good fish, and anywhere that's a good fish. But we catch quite a bit of 20 to 24s, and those are usually smaller size females or large males that are that size. But once you get over that 24 mark, you're looking at a lot of big females, gator trout, like I like to call them. Oh, yeah. And usually I start doing that around 25 to 26. Now, when you're in 27, yeah, you're getting large, like a 27-inch fish in the water. To even a trained eye at times is going to look like it's almost 30 inches. Yeah. Especially if they're heavy. In the spring, the spawn in the spring, like I said, coming into the winter when they're feeding heavily. You may catch 27-inch fish that are pushing 9 pounds if they've had a lot of stuff in them. So you can catch a seriously impressive gator trout at 27. And 28 and 29, that's when you start getting technical and you're basically measuring them to make sure they're not 30. That's usually when they start going on the bump board. I can eyeball a trout 26 and under, but when you get to 27 to that 30-inch range, you make sure you bump board them so if you cross that mark.
That's too cool. And so interesting, you mentioned a paddle tail. When I had Chris on, he I think only talked about artificial lures, and I think a lot of people believe that you have to have live bait and you have to have massive mullet and stuff. Not to say that you can't, because I know there's been some massive gator trout caught on live bait, but are you mostly artificial lures?
So me, myself, when I'm fishing for fun or with my friends, yes, we're all artificial. We actually, that old saying, I'm a huge fly fisherman, that hashtag, but I love fly fishing. It's my if I could only do that, that's what I would do. But with the wind we have up here, a lot of times spin fishing is the better way. And also I like throwing topwater plugs and stuff too. I'm not a purist by any means, but a lot of my friends are fly fishermen too. So we do fly fish for these gator trout and these redfish up here. With me and my friends, it's all artificial unless I have a friend I know is this in first time they can't work in artificial, I'll bring some live shrimp or mud minnows, cast net some mullet, and it can be done on live bait. Like a lot of the charters that I run, I'll bring live bait sometimes just to make sure that if the bite goes sour or things get real tough or my client's having an issue with a rhythm or the method of working in artificial, I'll throw on the old, pop and cork with a live bait. That can always work well as too. But mainly artificial. And when I throw spin tackle, it's a lot of topwater plugs, suspending plugs, slow sinking plugs, and really lightweighted paddle tails or weedless rig paddle tails. Sometimes some fluke baits, stick baits, things like that as well. Trap trick. Usually those three. When I'm trout fishing, I like to tell people it's not so much what you're throwing. A lot of times it's where it is in the column of water that you're working. If you're in a 6 to 10 foot or even 3 foot, this 10 foot section of water, you may have fish that are feeding in 3 different sections of water. It could be top, middle, or bottom. So a lot of guys will get locked into like, oh, I really like throwing hard plastic lip baits, and they'll throw on 4 or 5 different crank baits in different colors. Well, you're only working the middle to upper column of water. What about the bottom? So I usually like to have at least 3 rods rigged, 1 top, 1 middle, 1 bottom. If you find that they're zeroing in on one of those, well, that's obviously what you want to gravitate towards.
Interesting. Have you had any like consistent depths where you are catching more often than not? We're talking about the big ones in particular.
Well, right now, the area that I fish in is a little bit unique compared to a lot of the areas in Jacksonville that people are targeting trout in. A lot of our intracoastal water in our St. Johns River here in Jax can be up to 30 and 60 feet deep in some of the areas where they're shipping out of, and some of the deeper channels. There are backwater creeks that are shallower. But most of the time in the St. Johns River intracoastal area, this time of year, especially with the backwaters being filled with fish due to the higher heat levels, most of those trout are going to be anywhere from 15 feet deep to even 6 feet deep, hanging off of harder structure that has current moving around it. Pilings, docks, oyster bars, you name it right now. If it's got moving water and it's anywhere from 6 to 10 feet, maybe 15 feet deep, it's going to have a trout in there. But the majority of the fishing that I do in the Guana Preserve area, which has a shallow water lagoon that on average is only about 3 feet deep.
So you're like sight casting a lot of these then?
Well, the thing is, it's not really sight casting because the water is chocolate.
It's pretty brown, brackish there. Yeah, real brackish, real tannic colored. So even when it does get clear, you're still going to have a deep brown that makes it tough to see in. If I could draw a comparison, it's kind of like Louisiana and Mosquito Lagoon had a child and spit out guana. It's basically it's a shallow water, muddy bottom, no grass though. And it's really brown. So it's kind of like Louisiana waters with the depth of Mosquito Lagoon. So these fish are kind of doing some of the same things they would do in the shallow water flats. They're getting skinny. They're pushing baits into coves. They're tipping and rounding points here and there. They're blowing up bait. So you do look for visible signs as far as sight fishing: boils, big pushes, mud plumes, things that give away large movement. And obviously, if you see bait showers or fish skirting the surface, something's chasing them. But as far as actually putting eyes on the fish inside of the water, you're not going to get that very much because of the darkness. So you will do some blind casting here and there to find fish. But if you know where they like to hang a lot, you can look for movement and spot it. But it takes a pretty trained eye because there is a ton of mullet, all that kind of stuff in there that moves as well. So you can do some sight fishing when it's really low in there. But the majority of our fishing is knowing where they like to be and blind casting into it, or if you got me on the tower and I can spot some movement, a lot of times that'll help you out. But a lot of blind casting, big plugs, twitch bait, things like that. So I'm curious, how did you get so good? Because you're a young guy, and I mean, right? I mean, because that's always a question people have. Like, man, how does someone like you get so dialed in? And like, you didn't grow up. Did you grow up there? No.
Okay. Well, yeah, the background story actually kind of ties into Tyler's story, and it's funny how all this is kind of coming full circle now. It's actually really cool. But yeah, I grew up in Florida. I was a water baby from the minute I was born. I loved to be at the beach and the water, but I grew up more of a surfer and an athlete. Both my parents are from up north, moved up from Ohio and Missouri, and moved down and came down, and they had me and my brother, and we both turned into water babies. So they didn't know a lick about fishing or surfing or any of this. So I was all kind of self-taught with that, or had friends around the beach that helped me out. And I fished as a kid, and I used to go to ponds, go bass fish, and fish with friends on their boats. But it wasn't anything nearly as serious as Tyler, clearly was. I was more the soccer player and the surfer kid. And when I went to college in St. Petersburg, that's when things kind of started to change. I was exposed to flats fishing and the grass flats, mangroves, tarpon, snook. I mean, you name it, it was all there. And it just so happens that old scumbag Tyler, I love that kid. He was a member of the group of friends that I started hanging out with freshman year. And I actually had a Malibu 2 kayak at the time, and he was a fisherman. And every now and then we'd get together and fish off the kayak. But it wasn't until junior year I became his roommate, and we lived in the house together off of Tierra Verde in St. Pete. And we had, obviously told you the story about the cove that we had out front, the marina and all the docks and all that. So we would skip class here and there to go fishing off the kayak. He'd pull me around the flats, and he kind of, put the bug in me. He taught me how to tie knots properly, taught me all the technical side of things, how to rig properly, what to throw where, why we're doing what we're doing. He broke it down to me and made me understand it. And, that was, just me enjoying being out on the water, doing that stuff. It kind of just, settled into becoming more of a fisherman at that point than I was much of a surfer. And then when I came back home to Jacksonville after I graduated to interview for jobs, I started fishing a lot on the side. And
what kind of job were you trying to get?
Well, I was me and Tyler both actually had classes together, as funny as it is too, but we were both environmental science majors.
Huh.
So I was trying to be a conservation specialist with a local energy company, basically be a consultant to help people green up their homes and local businesses green their businesses up and save money, and, just the conservation edge of it, the energy sector and all that. So I was interviewing for that. I was bartending a lot on the side, so I had my days free. So spent a lot of time on the water fishing while I was bartending at night and interviewing for jobs, and ended up getting a lot more into the fishing than I thought I would, because I came back and kind of applied what I learned with Tyler fishing in the flats, and found that Guana had a lot of trophy-sized trout in there, and just basically dove in. Spent a lot of my time during the days fishing, waking up real early after some late nights, and started competing. That Jacksonville Kayak Classic tournament was the first tournament that I competed in, and I won. And I, at that point, had also launched the kayak charter, fell in with a local business, North Guana Outpost, the family there that runs it, the Ingalls. Gail, Lauren, Jim, and Brandon, all great people who had brought me into their family, like one of their own, and basically told me that, hey, we need a charter guide to run some of these kayak charters that we're going to start, and we need an eco tour guide. And I had an environmental science background, and I'd been in that Guana for about 2 years at that point every day. So just kind of naturally fell into that position. And when I won the kayak tournament, kind of launched the charter off the back of that, competed in a few more local tournaments, did well, and just, spent a lot of time on the water. One of my favorite things to say is there's no replacement for time spent on the water. I mean, it's invaluable. That kind of experience, is being there every day, day in, day out, seeing the water, understanding the movements of the fish and what they're doing and why they're doing it and all that. So, I mean, as far as like, how did I get good? I wouldn't say as good as I am. There's people who are still much better than I am and that I look up to, Tyler being one of them. But I mean, just time spent on the water. I was around the right person, being Tyler in college. And, I was on the boat with him one day and told him, man, I'd love to do what you're doing. And this is while I was still interviewing for jobs. And he just kind of looked at me and was like, just go for it, man. Just stop thinking about it. Just go for it. Just start chartering. And that's when I went and got a captain's license and all that, and been on the boat for 2 years now, been kayak fishing and leading charters for about almost 4 years now, as well as eco tours. I still run eco tours with North Guana Outposts on a weekly basis, and
cool. Do
fishing charters in between. So yeah, I spend a lot of time in the ecosystem, and it just so happens there's an incredible trout fishery there. And yeah, I like catching big trout, and anything keeps you motivated, like seeing a big trout, man. It's fun.
So it sounds like for a long time you just did kayak only guide. So
yeah,
okay, huh? What's that like?
I didn't really have access. I mean, it's tough. A kayak guide is a tough thing to do. It really is. The only reason that was kind of what I had access to. Like, even when me and Tyler were in school, like, neither one of us were, had enough money to have a boat. So we would be on the kayak paddling with each other. And I learned how to kayak fish. I learned how to kayak, fish from a kayak before I learned how to fish from a boat. So it gave me access to areas that are extremely hard for other boats to get into, real intimate, tight creeks and mangrove tunnels that open up into shallow water lagoons that fish are trapped in. I mean, it did provide opportunities that were more unique than what you would find on a boat, but it's just more or less what I had access to and what I knew how to do. And the shop that I went to was a paddle shop that sold fishing stuff, and they're a full blown retailer, but they're an emphasis on paddle fishing because the region that I'm in the Lagoon is a 9.9 horsepower regulation area. It's protected, so most of the guys that are regularly visiting are paddle guys. Mm-hmm. This is kind of a paddle heavy area, and that's what I had access to, and that's what I learned how to do. And then when I got some more money and started making some money after working in the bar and doing all that, I had enough money to go put a down payment on a boat and ended up getting an Ancona Shadowcast, small technical polling skiff that gets me really skinny, and I started doing 2-man and 1-man charters off of that. Right now with my buddy Chris Schultz, who runs Fish Jacks Charters, I'm actually helping him run his boat, which is a 24-foot Sea Fox bay boat. So now I have access to nearshore tarpon charters and snapper fishing and rock fishing around the jetties, bull reds, big jacks, all that good stuff that you can target with a bigger boat. So it just kind of snowballed, and every year I just keep trying to get a little bit bigger, a little bit better, and learn some new things.
And I assume you still get booked a lot because people want to catch the big trophy trout, right?
Yeah, I do. Now that it's the charter has been around for about 2 years, going on third year now. People do know that I tend to target trophy trout regularly, so I am getting some trout purists that are starting to contact me for spring spawn fishing and fishing when you might actually legitimately have a shot at catching a world record. And even if you don't catch an all tackle world record in the area I'm in, you can catch a line class world record. An angler that likes to come visit a lot, he actually comes and fishes without me now that he got his own boat. But it's Jay Wright, Dr. Jay Wright, he's an IGFA world record holder for several line classes of trout fishing for fly fishing. You can use 2-pound test and catch a 10-pound fish, and that's a world record. So yeah, we get a lot of those guys during the spring. A few guys from Georgia and South Carolina that like to come down and fish during that time too. But yeah, I do a lot of trophy trout fishing, and then in the summertime too, I do a lot of flood tide fishing. We have a lot of flood tide flats and big deep backwater creeks here that open up in Spartina flats. So the flood tides are real fun here for sight fishing redfish. Right now we're low tide this time of year is really good with all the fish coming into the backwaters for the heat. When it's a little bit colder, they come into the intracoastal for the higher heat levels, and they'll get real skinny at low tide, crawl around, eating shrimp and tailing and backing. Like I said, trout fishing right now is pretty good in the intracoastal as well. So yeah, I do a little bit of everything inshore and doing a little bit more onshore or nearshore and offshore now that I got a bigger boat.
So the $1 million question, when you were doing the eco tours, did you carry a fishing rod with you just in case you saw?
Nope. Can't do it. I know better than that. And the terrible thing, I mean, I've done eco tours like during flood tides, and I love to paddle them through the flood flats because it's very cool for them to be able to paddle through the grass.
Yeah.
And, you get to see tailing redfish and raccoons crawling around in the grass. But I mean, it's heartbreaking to look at the tailing redfish and not be able to do anything about it, or be in the Guana Lagoon and seeing, trout blowing up on the surface on a school of shrimp or something. And yeah, but I can't do it because they're not there to fish. They're there to do an eco tour. The one that I usually get is they ask if they can bring a fishing rod along on the eco tour, and I got to tell them no.
That's funny.
That's a whole different thing. Like we'll stop her in an area and won't move for an hour if I see a fish. So no, we keep it pushing, keep moving, keep paddling. I'll go back tomorrow and catch the fish I saw.
Yeah, so it's probably great scouting for you, right? You got the eyes on the water, you're there, and you get to see everything. So
it keeps me in the lagoon. Like I said, time spent. It just keeps me in there. It keeps me looking at things. So I get to see things, and it's more fun for me from the eco tours. It's more that I get to spread, knowledge of conservation and biology and environmental principles and all the stuff that I did get to learn. It's probably the most relative thing I do that's, using my college degree as far as the environmental science, the biology, and the marine science that, Tyler and I studied. I get to tell people about it and tell them how important it is to, conserve the habitat that we have, conserve the fishery, to respect the ecosystem, how everything is intertwined. My favorite saying, it's one of the bumper stickers that was on my old roommate's car. It was, we all live downstream. You can't expect to do something to one end of this ecosystem and not affect the other end. So it's just fun to talk to people about that and actually see them respond to it and go, oh, I didn't know that. And I start talking about the trout fishery and how special these big trout are. One female that's 24 inches long can carry up to 500,000 eggs.
Wow.
I mean, that's impressive. And you start saying that to people and they start garnering some respect for what's around them. And you're not just paddling, looking for wildlife and birds and stuff moving around the bank. I mean, every little thing underneath a kayak, from the plankton, the shrimp, all the things that you don't really see a whole lot of, all that stuff is intertwined. The quality of the water, how salty it is. I mean, just everything is really intertwined out there in those unique areas. And Guana, especially, being that it's a very, very unique body of water, is, it's fun to take people out there and show them that, because you might have a kid there who you just made into a naturalist or a fisherman, and he's going to keep that whole thing alive. So eco tours are fun. They let me talk a lot, which I'm pretty good at.
That's awesome, man. So I'm curious, because you kind of, it sounds like, really cut your teeth in St. Pete, and I heard you say that, you graduated and all of a sudden you're back in Jacksonville and applied the same stuff. And what I believe that to be true, because we use the same lures, the same tactics, the same pre-trip planning that we do in Tampa is that we do when we go fish your neck of the woods, as we do, Daytona Beach when they were recently, all the way to Louisiana or Texas. But I think a lot of weekend warriors always have that mindset that, oh, well, my area is different. And certainly it is. There's different types of baits. And obviously you guys have, a much different looking tides and tidal flow than we might have in Tampa. But let's talk about the similarities. Like what's your honest feedback and really just kind of some tips on just applying general trout knowledge and what to look for, and maybe not necessarily to go catch a 30-incher, but just to have consistent bite, because that's really what most of us want, right? Like the average person, you got a hall pass or a day off work or whatever, you don't want to get skunked. You want to have tight lines and have fun. What do you got for that?
Well, if you're in right now, being that it's winter, if you're applying that to right now and that it's winter time, a lot of these fish are going to be pushed up skinny. They're looking for hotter water. They're looking for, thermal layers that usually tend to be more present inside these, grass flats that you guys have, maybe the mud flats that I'm in here, or if you're in my area with, an intracoastal like we have, usually the intracoastal waterways are going to be where you're going to want to focus. Anywhere inland water, anywhere that has some moving water is good. But right now, being that the offshore water is most of the ocean temps are a little cooler, our fish are flushing to the backwaters and the creeks, and your fish are flushing into the grass flats. So right now, if you want to do well with, trout in general, as well as big trout, which most of us who consider trout fishing, if you want to get numbers, that's all good and well. But if you want to see those big girls, you've got to understand where your clusters are. But those big grass flat fish, and you'll catch a lot of 15 to 18, 20-inch trout that are around those gator trout. Females will hang out with the males here and there. But anywhere you get those clusters, you can find gator trout. But you will catch a lot of small ones. But, it's like what I said as far as what I tend to throw is, columns of water. Even in 1 foot of water, you can still work columns of water. It's a little harder to work, a twitch bait or a crankbait in 2 to 3 feet of water, because you're probably going to be yanking into the mud of the grass. But in general, low light periods, first thing in the morning, going into the evening, or cloudy general days like that, where it's, low light, cloudy like that, topwater. Topwater should be a go-to always for trout fishing, no matter where you're at. It is one of the most instinctual things that trout will do. When they're not hungry, they will eat a topwater plug. One of the more popular, unique photos that I've ever taken, that's on my Instagram that you can go check out, is a trout that is around 28 inches long in the 9-pound range that has an 18-inch redfish in its gut with the tail coming out of the trout's face.
Oh, that's right.
So
I think we reposted that one. That was nuts.
Yeah, I've seen it happen before. Never got my hands on the fish, or never was able to get the fish hooked. I have friends out there who have seen it, but I've never seen it personally. So it finally happened. But trout will eat when they're not hungry. Clearly, that fish was not hungry. It ate the plug just on pure instinct. It looked up, saw something that looked wounded and was twitching, and just smashed it. So the topwater plug will bring about some serious ambush responses from the fish that are, like I said, downright instinctual. They'll do it even if they don't want to. Sometimes they'll do it just to kill it, not even to eat it. The topwater plug is going to be one of your best all-around trout lures in low light periods, even in certain areas like Mosquito Lagoon during the wintertime, or even in the middle of the day in the summer. A topwater plug will get and eat from a trout. It's just something that's very, very effective for them. But the low light periods, the topwater plug will usually get smoked as long as you don't have any crazy pressure or wind or anything like that. But the topwater plugs are a great way to also search cast. They cover a lot of ground. You can absolutely bomb them with a light tackle rod. That you can make 50-yard casts almost with these things, especially when you're downwind. So you can cover a lot of ground. You can get a lot of violent strikes. And when it's on, it's on. That's all you're going to want to throw. It's very visual. It's extremely fun. You get to watch the blow up. So topwater is what I would throw all day, every day if I could. However, a lot of times when that light comes up, they are going to stop looking up. A lot of times they start moving to deeper water or just stop striking the surface. I have a couple of theories on that, along with some other guys that I've talked to. If you talk to Jay Wright, he's a doctor by trade, so he's very technical with his trout fishing, and he's one of the guys that I look up to. He has told me and talked about it that trout do have a night vision lens in their eye. I believe it's called the tapetum lucidum. I may be wrong about that, but it's the tapetum lucidum or something along those lines. But it's a lens in their eye. It's a night vision lens. It allows them to see at night very, very well. But on the opposite side of that, I do believe that kind of makes it tough for them to look up into sunlight in the middle of the day. It might be that it's uncomfortable for them to do, like us staring at the sun. I just think it has something to do with the highlight hours. They don't like to strike on the surface as much as they do during the low light hours. It could have to do with the rise in plankton. Plankton rises to the surface during the low light hours, and that's why fish will start rising. It really just depends on some of the things, but I think it's just more that they like low light hours to eat surface baits. So as the sun comes up, you're going to want to start going more subsurface. Now, your first two options will probably be, to weight a soft plastic with a jig head, get it down on the bottom. You can use paddle tails for that. You can use fluke tails, trout tricks, stick baits. Any of that stuff is all pretty good. Really just depending on what how your retrieve is and what you're more comfortable throwing as far as what you're confident in. DOA shrimp are always good, but in general, just a paddle tail, standard, DOA, SST, the Slayer paddle tail is what I tend to throw more of. There's a guy up here who makes those, and I really like throwing those paddle tails. But any paddle tail, with like a 16th ounce jig head or quarter ounce spinning on your current, that would be good for the bottom. The middle column of water, my favorite confidence bait that you'll hear a lot of guys talk about that are trout fishermen, are the Miradines. The Miradine line made by Miralure. Yep. They're slow sinking twitch baits. It's just a traditional spade shaped twitch bait with a little rattle and a mirror, some reflective outer covering. That thing is a trout killer. So your topwater bait, topwater plugs, and then Miradine or twitch baits, or like in Tyler's region, I know he likes to throw a lot of X-Wraps, especially for his snook, but those are good for trout as well. It just really depends on your depth. If you're fishing where I am in 3 feet of water, you can get away with throwing a Miradine as long as you keep it up off the bottom and keep popping it. If you're in about 2 feet or less, though, it's going to be tough to throw a twitch bait that's got treble hooks on it because it's probably going to grab. But if you're working with 3 feet or more, the Miradine or an X-Wrap lit bait, shallow diving, not too deep diving, all that depends on your depth, obviously. If you're in 15 feet of water, go ahead and break out a deep diving, crankbait and have at it. They'll hit it too. But when with the retrieves of those, with it being cold right now, slow retrieves, couple twitches here and there, give that thing a good pause. It's another thing that I like to do with topwater. A lot of guys like to come out and they do these furiously fast retrieves. Every now and then, give that thing a good pause. So they'll maybe able to catch up to it or give them a second thought about eating it. You get a big lazy fish, sometimes they don't want to rise immediately. It gives them a second to catch it, gives them a second thought, and they can smack it when it's at dead still instead of chasing it down. But yeah, those are the three. Like I said, you're going to find a lot of that tied up with a lot of trout guides, which is topwaters, twitch baits that are either hard plastic, or you can even do soft baits like Paul Brown's, things like that. And then little paddle tails. So you can even go unweighted paddle tails. That's another thing I like doing. Unweighted paddle tails where there's just a weedless hook in them. And you can pop those just like you would a hard plastic. And a lot of the bigger trout will eat those as well. What's fun about the big paddle tail too is you can use like the really big, fat, soft plastics. And you can just put a big weedless hook in it and you can crack it and hit it just like you would a hard plastic. And you can get really big baits that aren't really going to, sink too fast. And you can use big soft plastics like that.
Yeah, I'm going to put a couple of Slam Shady paddle tails in the mail to you, dude.
Yeah, man. I'll take it every guy. I'll get some pictures for you. Those trout eat it.
Well, just want to warn you, you're going to start catching them over 30 inches again. So,
hey, I'll call you if that happens, and then I'll let you know you're onto something.
Well, Peter Deeks, who fishes a little bit south of you, he's kind of more of a live bait guy, and he's got a handful of world records caught off his boat. And
I'm well aware.
Yes, yeah, Deeks. So I don't know if you saw that video we did with him, but he was kind of skeptical. He's like, dude, it's just a paddle tail, like. And no lie, he went out and we got the whole thing on video, and it was a massive school of bull reds. They were like literally like sleeping, like they weren't touching anything. No live bait. He was letting stuff drift by him, like just nothing was happening. He's like, all right, I'm just gonna make some commotion, and throws on that big. It was the 5-inch scented Slam Shady paddle tail, and just put like hardly just like a little small weighted hook, not even a jig head on the one, and started catching them. And the very fine one had a jig head on it, I believe. And it ended up being 50-inch, which is one of his biggest or longest redfish ever. I mean, once you start getting 50 inches and it measured just over 50, and he was just like, you got to be kidding me. I caught this on an artificial lure. I'm supposed to be the live bait guy. So we gave him a hard time, but he's like, yeah, they will certainly attract some strikes. I know someone's going to ask this. You mentioned Topwater. Do you have a specific brand and or size, like if it's a Spook or Spook Junior or anything?
Spook. You already said it, Spook. Spook is the go-to. I personally, just the way they move, the way they sound, the pitch they have, I just like everything about them. I don't like the hooks, and no one will tell you that the hooks are all pretty crappy. You're going to want to replace the hooks on the Spooks and get yourself some VMCs or whatever you trust as far as a strong hook. But the plug itself is, really good to throw. They do have more than just your typical old Spook chrome body that, a big gator trout can puncture a chrome body, lure pretty easily with those big teeth. So yeah, plastic body ones are always good. They're nice and light. When the water does get pretty choppy, if you're topwater fishing and choppier water, some bigger plugs, like a Spook. I think a Super Spook is a pretty large one, but the Mirror Lure Top Dogs is probably the next one I would throw. They're heavier bodied, a little bit longer, and those will work through a chop a little bit better. Those are basically the only two I have. I do every now and then get real bougie with it and go get some Yozuri stuff on like $10 lures. But I'll throw some of the Yozuri pencils here and there. But my go-to is usually a Spook. As far as colorways, I'm of the state of mind and school of thought that I don't think color really has anything to do with the topwater eat a lot of times. That may be untrue in some clear water areas. If you're in a very, clear water, Southwest Florida flat, or in the Keys or somewhere around Florida that has some very clear water, color is probably going to be a little bit more important. But if you're fishing low light hours or in darker water where I fish, I do not believe color matters at all. I think that plug could be rainbow colored and they're still going to eat it, because what they're often looking up and seeing is an outline, a shadow. If you go dive under a boat and you look up at a boat, you see a dark shadowy outline. You don't see very many colors, if any at all. So especially in the lower light hours when it's dim as it is, these fish are looking up and they're seeing blurred lines, an outline shadow, and something moving like a wounded fish. And they're basically reacting. You're very rarely going to convince a fish to eat a topwater plug based on what color it is. They're not going to look at it that hard. They're either going to look up, see it twitching right, sounding right, moving right, and absolutely demolish it, or they're going to come up behind it while it's moving and wait for you to get the right rhythm and roll behind it, tail slap it, head swipe it, doing what all the stuff they like to do with the topwater plugs. But very rarely should you be so concerned, like, oh, my plug color is not working. I've thrown pink and white right next to, chartreuse and red, and they've all worked. It's more reactionary. It's an instinctual ambush reaction that they have with a topwater plug. So it's more, you want to focus more on how the plug moves more so than what it looks like as far as color. Sound and pitch can be big too. The mirror lures have a deeper knocker, make a more deep pitched knock noise when they're being rattled. The spooks have a bit more of a high pitched aluminum sounding rattle, which may have something to do with why these fish like it more. But in general, I really like the way the plug swings on the surface of the water, walks back and forth. The walking the dog method with it is really clean, moves really well. You can stop it real well and then bring it right back on rhythm, and it stays clean and moves well. That's my go-to as far as the topwater.
Love it. Let's talk about pre-trip planning. I think that's a place that kind of makes or breaks, especially a lot of the weekend warriors who are, don't have the privilege of being on the water every day like you. I think it can be intimidating. Let's just say, like you mentioned, Tampa. Like right now, grass flats could be a great place. There's a lot of grass flats. What are you doing, and like what are you looking for when you're pre-trip planning? And then we'll kind of talk on the water next in terms of looking for birds or bait or things like that. But on the off the water, what are some tips just to kind of share for that average dude?
Well, first things first, check your tides. You need to know your tides, whether the spot you're going to be heading to has water on it or not is pretty important.
Yeah.
In Southwest Florida, the tides aren't as big as we have here in Jacksonville. We have 6-foot tides. So first of all, make sure the water is going to be in the spot that you want to go.
Yeah.
Know your tides, so know when the water's coming and going. Always know that moving water is always better than stagnant water. So if you've got water moving on or off the flats, that's always better. If you've got, like, for example, when Tyler and I would go hit, the potholes in the grass flats, that's always a great way. Tyler and I still to this day look for sandy potholes in the middle of grass flats. So when you're moving onto a grass flat and you know that the water is, let's say the water's draining off the grass flat, those fish are going to be moving out of the potholes. So you're going to be working out around the grasses through the potholes. If the water's moving into the grass flats, they could be moving into the potholes. So you're going to want to focus on the potholes again. But if the water's too drained, they may only be in the potholes. There's times out there, and I know when they get those winds out there, that you can have a flat in Southwest Florida that's nearly dry where the grass tips are almost on the water, and the potholes may be the only spot the fish are. So you can get to the potholes if you want. But if your boat's not deep enough to get on that grass flat, keep that in mind. You got to know your tides. So, the water's filling in, go focus on the potholes, go fish some potholes in the grass flats. If it's, super high, you may want to move into the mangrove lines and go fish the mangrove trees and beat up the groves, because those fish will push back into the mangroves. But in general, the grass flats, potholes are always a good area to look for. You do want to look for big swirls. You obviously want to look for bait showers. Anytime you see a shrimp skirting across the top of the water, more than likely there's a redfish or a trout beneath it eating it. So that's always something to look for. Obviously, bait showers, birds diving, always good to see as well. But in general, if you're stalking a grass flat, looking for big boils or looking for shadows, having some nice glasses. Personally, I wear RCI optics, just low light glasses, amber lenses to bring out the shadows underneath them on the flats are always good to use. But visual cues is big boils, pushes, big mud plumes in the water, nervous bait. Anytime you find big mullet schools in the flats in South Florida, you're always going to find some bigger fish lurking on the outside of them, whether they're snook, trout, or redfish. Big bait schools, big mullet schools are always good. I do know that a lot of the fish like to blend in with big mullet schools, the ones that seem like they're a little bit too large to eat. You'll catch a lot of fish looming around those bait schools that are trying to scrum up whatever those mullet move. But this time of year, focus on the potholes, focus on the grass flats, get skinny. Those fish are getting skinny looking for heat. Here in North Florida, generally you want to expect to end up in the back creek at some point when it gets skinny. But as far as pre-chip planning, kind of go through scenarios in your head, understand that, this is what you run into. You see this, you're going to want to have this ready, have multiple rods rigged the night before, do all your rigging, all your packing, all the gear gathering, and do all of that the day or the night before. Don't be doing it that morning, realizing you don't have what you need, or you're going out there, half planned. I always rig my boat, have it basically ready to hop on the trailer if possible, first thing in the morning. So all I do is walk out there and hook it up and go. Please don't be the guy at the boat ramp doing that either. That's a good rookie mistake. You'll see guys, cooler going on, and the tackle box going on, and the food's going on, and then all the life jackets are going on. Have all that packed the night before, so when you pull up, you hook up, you drop in, and you're ready to rock. And you'll obviously take care of any issues and things that you're missing the night before if you do it then. But think about where you're going, what you're doing, what you're going to need. Always bring some extra water in case you end up being in a situation where you get caught at low tide and you have to be on the boat 6 hours longer than you thought you were. But in general, just run through the scenarios in your head and understand what you need to bring. Have all that ready. Think about where you'll be going. Have some backup spots ready if you think that you're going to show up to a spot and it's popular and there's going to be another person there, or it's going to be too high pressure fishing. Have some backup spots ready. And, the biggest thing, though, too, and all the preparation that you can do is when you get on the water, just be reactionary. React to what you see. The best guys are the ones who can adapt on the spot to what's happening and, break out the rig that they didn't know they needed, or have a wide range of baits ready. There's always something you might see that, you might want to catch. And the worst thing you can do is show up on rig. If you have the rods on the boat, that's great, but have them rigged and ready, because you might be motoring out across the flat or motoring away from the boat ramp and run into something that you're not ready to catch. So always have at least a rod ready to throw. Go through the scenarios in your head. I usually say at least 2 rods per person, just to make sure that you have a backup thing ready to roll if they break one, or just to have an extra rig to throw. Obviously make sure your boat plug is in, and make sure you have a fishing license. That's step 1 and 2. But other than that, just go through the scenarios in your head. I'm one of those guys that'll run through 50 scenarios in my head as I'm laying down to go to sleep the night before a charter, and usually makes me not sleep very well, but it makes me pretty prepared.
Yeah, it's what separates the guys doing it full time from the rest of us. That's awesome, man. I want to switch over, because you mentioned conservation, and you've got a unique perspective because you are a guide. I mean, you're making a living from the water, and you do the eco tours, and it was also something you studied in college. I guess first and foremost, I want to ask you questions that it just hit my email recently this week. Did you see the Inlet Proposal on change.org in a little bit south of you in that Patrick Air Force Base area for the Lagoon?
I saw something the FWC released recently about sea trout regulations. I don't know if I saw what you're talking about, though. Yeah,
I'll put a link and I'll send it over to you. I haven't even investigated it, but someone I know well and admire, he was an ex-Orvis instructor and really tied in with the Mosquito Lagoon, and obviously a massive fly fisherman. He had sent it over to me. He's like, "Hey, check this out." And it was it's basically a new inlet proposal, like just north of Patrick Air Force Base. And I don't know what all that means and how it's going to work, but there's like thousands of people are signing this petition to Rick Scott. So anyhow, I wanted to throw that out there. But let's talk about that conservation and just what you're seeing there as a guide, and maybe any I don't know that you have the solution per se, but just thoughts in general about the Indian River, Mosquito Lagoon, and Iguana, because that's also kind of a special lake there as well. What are you seeing?
Well, as far as the first thing with the new inlet, I didn't know about that, but building a new inlet would be intense to say the least in any ecosystem. I mean, I imagine it would be Army Corps of Engineers ripping out a section of beach and probably marsh to create that. I'm really not too sure. I haven't heard anything about it, but that sounds, it would drastically change the hydrology of a region. That's for sure. But as far as general, the health of the ecosystems, the IRL, the Mosquito Lagoon, and Southwest Florida even. It's our area in Jacksonville is not nearly as touched by the pressure or the ecosystem degradation that is occurring down south and around the lagoon and around Lake Okeechobee. We don't have nearly as many people on the water, number one. You guys have a much larger recreational boating scene and fishing scene once you get to New Smyrna and south than we do in Jacksonville, mainly because we do not have a year-round fishery. I mean, you can fish here year-round, but we do get cold weather. With you guys being a little further south, you tend to have a bit more of a year-round fishery and pressure, and you do get a lot more snowbirds down there than we do get up here. But yeah, the red tide and all, I mean, I know Tyler dealt with a lot with the red tide in Southwest Florida this year. In Jacksonville, we only get it in the summertime, usually on the coast, and it's in the ocean and it's moving. It's never been that intense. We haven't got it in Jackson, I think, last 3 or 4 years, to be honest with you. It happens now and then, but it's very mild. It usually doesn't go too far inland into the backwaters. We may have a few small bait fish that die, but it's usually just irritation for people who are sensitive to that, like asthma and stuff like that. But in South Florida, yeah, the stuff that's happening down there is much more serious. And, as far as the pressure and the regulations and all that, my main feeling is that FWC just has to be a little bit more responsive to the ecosystem change and kind of update some of the rules and understand that there's just, a lot of these regulations are being updated, but they were originally made back in the 60s and 70s and 80s, I believe, when a lot of this stuff was first started coming out. So it's still very reactionary and could be a little more, proactive in protecting the fishery. That's something I would like to see soon happen, just them being on top of, like we were talking about earlier with the red tide, and seeing a red tide bloom occur, and instead of waiting till the following year to close down the fishery, yep, go ahead and close it down now. I mean, it's no matter how bad it gets, it would still be better for the ecosystem to do that. But that's not really FWC's fault, or that's the bureaucracy of how it's set up. It's a little more reactionary instead of proactive. But I would like to see some of the the fishing regulations updated, protecting some of these bigger fish, limiting the slot, limiting the harvest of some of the sport fish that we make money off of, like redfish. But as far as the ecosystems itself, the degradation, the collapse possible in the future of things like Mosquito Lagoon, that unfortunately is a very big reality. Just what we're dealing with in Florida, with a lot of wild spaces being paved over, a lot of old septic systems, and on Okeechobee, the sugar refinery, all that stuff. It's things that are unfortunately happening that we're going to have to figure out in the future, and how to maintain them or decrease them, or hopefully stop expanding into some of these wild areas and help the ecosystem survive. Because if we don't, it's clear the pressure that we have on it right now with the amount of people fishing, with the degradation of the ecosystem, that in the future we're looking at possibly having a rapid change of either the fishery or just the regulation of the fishery. I think it's coming to that point where something will have to be done at some point, because there's just sheer amount of number of fishing these days, the obvious degradation of the ecosystem. It's rough. I'm fortunate being in Jacksonville. Like I said, we have less pressure, and we don't have as much of the red tide up in this direction, just because of our colder winters. But we do still see more people on the water on a weekly basis. There's more people buying boats, kayaks. There's more accessibility these days from all ends. The fish are getting it. They're under siege from all directions right now. They're getting their ecosystem crapped all over by the poor water quality. The boats are getting faster. They're getting shallower. The electronics are getting more dialed in. Kayaks and paddle boards can go places that they couldn't used to. So there's not a whole lot of places fish can hide anymore. And then with the fishing being so dialed in by a lot of us, it's hard for these fish to do as well as they used to. And then you have more and more people doing it. One of the examples I like to use on my eco tours, when I talk to people, when I explain pressure, you see, if you say like, fishing pressure, or pressure on the water, pressure on the fish, they don't really understand what you're saying. And the way that you can describe it is, what if you lived underneath of an airport and there were planes flying over your head day in, day out, to where you couldn't sleep very well, or you just have one coming over you disturbing you. And then some of these planes are dragging cheeseburgers by your face, and they have hooks attached to them. And every now and then when you're feeling hungry, you eat a cheeseburger, you get yanked out of the water. And then the air you breathe is going to have toxic smoke in it from all the engines, and you're not feeling very well to begin with. So you're not feeling very well, you have planes flying over your head, and you're getting yanked out of the water by fishermen. That's basically the life of some of these fish and some of the areas that they're in. So that's what I mean by pressure and by the health of the fishery, that, it's tough for these fish. And eventually, there's only two ways it can go. It will collapse, or we have to stop doing what we're doing. That's just, unfortunately, the sheer number of things with the amount of people that are moving into Florida, and, the population expansion is going to happen. But yeah, hopefully we can curtail that. FWC can become, like I said, more proactive about some of these things, and, conservation and catch and release fishing can get more of a hold. And some of these newer generations, the younger generations are really into social media more so than our generation is. Every generation gets more and more into social media and circulating pictures and all that. And that's actually really good for CPR fishing, because a lot of the younger kids can get into, circulating photos instead of killing fish. Most time I ask these guys, would you rather have an HD photo of your fish or, kill it? Oh yeah, I'd rather have a photo. Like, let's do that. Like, okay, yeah, cool. Let's take a photo, and you can brag to, 3 million of your friends instead of just showing 3 of them. So yeah, hopefully the conservation can take root. And, as far as the water quality and those issues, if our governor keeps doing the things that he's doing, hopefully that we'll have the Okeechobee situation taken care of. We can focus on, Mosquito Lagoon getting better and curtail some of the red tide on both sides of the state. That would be real nice.
And so CPR is catch, photo, release.
Catch, photo, release.
Okay.
CPR fishing. We run a lot of the kayak tournaments and a lot of kayak fishing in our CPR, because that's how our tournaments are run. So we can take a photo of our fish on a bump board with a token and a key to let you know that it was that day. And instead of killing all the fish or, trying to keep them alive in a live well, you can just CPR photo release them. And that's how we run most of our tournaments.
What percentage of your customers, people who are, paying you now to be their guide, are catch and release versus I'm in it for the meat. I want to bring either one, or I want to limit out, or what are you finding?
For me personally, a lot of my clients, it's about 50-50. And it really just depends on what we're targeting. I make it very clear from the minute that I do these trout charters, even if the client is not going there for a trout charter and we're in the middle of a great trout bite, I will make them fully aware before we leave the dock that any fish over 20 to 24 inches is going back. And it basically is on my discretion as far as how fat the belly looks and whether it's, male, female, et cetera. If it's pregnant, it's probably going back in the water. And that's just to maintain the fishery. And that's just a principle that I guide by, and I let people know as far as the trophy fish, they're going back. But redfish and things like that, I do allow some responsible harvest of, and any guide should if their moral compass allows them to. But it's about 50-50. And a lot of that too also depends on angler education. And if you spend enough time on the boat with someone like me or Tyler, we're going to start talking about conservation. We're going to start telling you the biology of the fish that you're catching. And that will, again, draw on the natural appreciation when people start hearing that a trout can hold 500,000 eggs, that, it takes 2 years for this fish to get to a harvestable size, that if you let it grow for another 3-4 years, it will be out of harvestable size and protected forever. You start telling people about the ecosystem, about how important it is, and they'll start naturally wanting to conserve it, wanting to respect it. And I find a lot of people, when I tell them that, 500,000 eggs in that trout's stomach, like, oh, no, let's put her back in the water. Absolutely. Yeah, most people, awesome. They draw the natural appreciation as long as you can impart on them how important and how unique what you're holding is. But you still have some, I would love to take home, some food tonight. And that's usually when we'll start harvesting 15 to 20 inch trout, or, a couple 18 to 24 inch reds. Even though we have a 27 inch slot, I still like to eat the 2-year-olds or the responsible harvest usually. But I mean, it's 50-50, and then it depends on the type of fishing you do too, and where you're at and the clientele you have. But most people who come into Guana with me, can understand that it's just a different situation there. But I do allow some responsible harvest, but it's about 50-50. And it really depends on time of the year, what they're targeting, and, who they are essentially.
That's awesome, man. So I love this. I know we said we'd try to do an hour, and we're right there. This was a really, really fun one. I'm super proud of you and all that you're doing there. And I think what you're talking about there is really going to be one of the biggest catalyst for fishing, especially in Florida, to help make an improvement. And that's the guides who are getting hired on a day-to-day basis all over the state. And a lot of it is going to be that guide educating, right? And just what you said, I mean, it's a whole different ball game, because you could have done just the opposite and said, yeah, we're going to go out there and limit out and kill it. And we're going to load the cooler up, which nothing wrong with that if that's really what you're into. But I really believe it's going to take guides who a lot of these people are looking up to, and who a lot of these, people are either tourists, or maybe they're even just tourists from the middle of the state, and they're getting into fishing, and they're going to be looking to the guides to tell them what's right and wrong, and really just to kind of be conservation minded. So I applaud you for doing that. And I imagine too, it kind of goes hand in hand, since you're doing eco tours. You're used to talking about the beauty of everything that's there, and why we want to preserve it. And hey, don't hit that with your paddle. You might end up killing it. Let's take care of what God's given us here. So that's awesome, man.
Absolutely. I appreciate that, man. Thank you. As I always tell my clients, one of the best comments and the best compliments I get on the boat are usually that, it was fun to fish. It was great to catch these fish that we caught, and they were great fish, but it was crazy how much you know about the ecosystem and how much you love it. And that's the biggest compliment you can usually give any guide, because we really do love being out there, and we really do appreciate this ecosystem and what it has to offer.
Love it, my friend. Well, where can everyone go find you? How can they book you, follow you on Instagram, and all that great stuff?
Oh, yeah. It's Chips Coastal Charters, name of the business. Instagram, it's Captain Matt Chipperfield is the tag. Got the Facebook business page and all that good stuff going as well. So feel free to reach out. The email, chipscoastalcharters@gmail. I guide 365, 24/7. Right now, we're coming into a good time for trout. We got some low tide crawling redfish around, and of course, the springtime. You want to catch some possibly world record trout? That's the time to book.
That's awesome. And is the website the Chips Coastal as well?
ChipsCoastalCharters.com. Okay. Yes, sir.
ChipsCoastalCharters.com. Sweet, awesome. Well, brother Matt, this has been really, really fun. I'm definitely gonna send you over this Inlet thing. I'd love to hear your feedback on it. And for those of you listening, I'll put a link, because it's a really long URL. I'm trying to find it as we're talking, but I don't want to get too distracted. But I will definitely make sure to post it in the show notes, and you can find that. It's saltstrong.com/podcast. You'll see this one listed up at the top, and we'll have all the links to book old Captain Matt, and to find out about this Inlet proposal that I'm going to be looking into here this weekend. And anything else that you guys want to see, let us know. We'll have a place to put comments in. And as always, please, please, please subscribe if you haven't already, and leave a review. Let us know what we're doing great. Obviously, 5-star reviews are awesome. It helps us get great guests like Matt, and lets this thing keep growing completely sponsor-free and ad-free like you say you want it. So thank you all for the support, all the love. Go give Captain Matt some love on Instagram, and book him to catch big old trouts, big old reds, and just have a good overall fun time and learn a lot more about our ecosystem. Matt, have a wonderful Christmas holiday season, first of the year, etc., buddy.
You too, bud. I appreciate you having me on.
Yes, sir. Chat soon.
'Cause fishing, it's in my soul, it was pain.